Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined as always by my co-host, Scott Pianowski. Scott, we're deep into the summer now, it feels like, at least. Offense is picking up, the weather's getting hot, and we got a lot of baseball to talk about today.
We do. Most teams are right around that halfway point, the 81 game part of the season. So it's cool. For one thing, it gives you a good idea of what pace your players are on statistically. And you should have a really good idea of what you're doing, especially if you're in a keeper league, right? My main keeper league, there's a trade deadline where everybody who can't be kept next year has to be traded before the start of play on Monday. So you have to decide, draw a line in the sand. Can I cash this year? Can I win this year? Am I playing for next year? Do I want to get a more flexible roster? So, we talk about maybe don't look at the standings in April. I do anyway. I know you're not supposed to. They don't have a lot of meaning to them. But now you should know not only where your team is at, but you can really attack categories, right? If you're an island in a category, if you're like 12 saves ahead of everybody else or 13 steals ahead of everybody else, you may be able to make a trade that doesn't even hurt you in that category and helps you elsewhere. So it's a good time to take stock. I realize, it's July 4th isn't far away, and people are going to start going on vacation, and, things get more complicated. And the other thing I want to mention before we get into a very full show is this is the time of the year where your opponents, they're going to be taking their kids to baseball traveling leagues and soccer games, and they're going to go to the Cape. And this is a time where you can really make up a lot of ground just by doing your diligence. Just like you're hitting the wire every period, paying attention to the save chase, all that stuff. Just by so much of fantasy baseball success is just committing to the full season.
Is just taking advantage of those parents with their kids.
Right. Those people with full lives, right? This is not you. You're competitive and you're going to take those people down. And, they may look better on Facebook, but you're going to look better in the standings.
There were 3 straight 90+ degree days in New York this weekend. I had my son was home with me on all 3 of those days, and by Sunday night I was like, I don't just, what do I got? Like who's in fab? We'll get it done quick. I forced myself to get through it. And we're going to talk about a lot of that. I was lucky enough, there was nothing this week in waivers that I felt was like a must have or must bid on. There are some guys that are interesting, which we'll talk about. This is obviously our waiver wire show. So we are going to go through some of the news and notes and then talk about some of the hitters and pitchers who were added, or some guys that Scott and I see on the horizon that we think maybe it could be time to stash. As always, before we do that, if you want to rate and review this podcast, it is super helpful to us to get the podcast out there so people can check it out. So please make sure to do that. Download, rate, and review. We're going to talk about the suspension that is looming, that everybody knows is looming, but has not been announced yet, which is the Edwin Diaz suspension. He was ejected without throwing a pitch on Sunday night for having a sticky substance on his fingers that he claims was rosin and sweat, and that the head umpire said was the stickiest hand he's seen in 1,000 hands he's checked, which is just a weird statement to have to make about your own job. But it seems like Edwin Diaz is headed for a 10-game suspension. We should note the Mets are only playing 5 games this week, so you're probably looking at 2 full weeks without Edwin Diaz. I don't really know what the correct move is. It seems like it will be some sort of combination of Reed Garrett and Adam Ottavino and maybe Jake Diekman, because that's what the Mets did before. And so maybe if you want to put in some small bids on any of those guys and hopefully steal a save or 2, but this is not like a must add situation here.
No, I don't think so. Although I will throw a token endorsement to Reed Garrett, who did get the 8th inning. That's why he couldn't get the save. He's already out of the game when Diaz came on and that whole theater went down Sunday night. I'm really curious to see what the Mets do, by the way. I mean, they're 37 and 39, but they're only a game out. National League, most teams are under 500. So I look at this roster. I don't think they're anywhere close to like winning a championship or anything. I think they should be trading guys and shopping people, but maybe they would rather make the playoffs. There's a lot of teams in that position. Our Red Sox on the other side of baseball is, they have a winning record, but they're on the cusp of making the playoffs. I don't know what they're going to do with Alex Cora either. It's kind of interesting year with the Red Sox, but I think Reed Garrett here's the thing. If he's not going to get saves in these 10 days when they don't have Diaz, and the Mets have played better of late, and for some reason their offense hits like crazy on the road. I can't give you a reason why that's true, but Nimmo's been a very underrated top 15 outfielder for them. And Garrett's going to get leverage work. Maybe it's tie game work. Maybe it's save game work. The strikeout rate is still really good. And I realized he was like too good to be true for about 6 weeks. And then for about 3 weeks, he was terrible. But he would be, if you need to invest here, and there are other places you may want to go for saves where the path is a lot clearer. There's another injury we'll talk about in the National League where it's, and you probably already reacted to it because you're a competitive manager, people listening. But if I had to bet on anybody, Reed Garrett's my guy.
Yeah, the Mets, it'll be interesting. We'll talk about this on our trade deadline shows, which will be coming up in the weeks ahead. I always thought that their rotation was assembled to be traded at the deadline, right? Manaea, Severino, Hauser, these were all guys who they would get something out of Quintana and ship off. And now, how many can they trade if they're trying to make it? Which spots are they getting rid of? So that would be an interesting thing to keep in mind as we go forward. You obviously alluded to the other closer situation. Well, there's two. This one is David Bednar hit the IL with an oblique injury that the Pirates they're outwardly saying they don't expect it to be a big deal, but Bednar has dealt with obliques in the past, and we understand that oblique injuries sometimes take longer than expected. So, it could be the minimum 10 days. It could be longer. We won't really know until he starts ramping back up again. It seems like Aroldis Chapman is the logical bet here. I scooped him up in a couple of places last night where I needed saves, but I kept the bids really modest because I think there's a chance you're looking at just 2 weeks here of a closer on a team that's, under 500. And I don't really know how many saves you're going to get. And so I'm not willing to spend big, but yeah, if you're hoping to pick up 3, maybe 4 saves, if Bednar misses 3 weeks, something like that. But I don't think this is a super long-term thing.
A lot of times we talk about closers. It's like roster them, don't watch them pitch. Aroldis Chapman is very high on that list. He's walked 27 batters in 27 innings. Now, thankfully, he also has 45 strikeouts. The ERA is at 4. The WHIP is ungodly. It's ugly. It's almost 1.7. But he's the obvious guy on a Pirate team, another team that's kind of in no man's land right now. Are they a contender? Are they not a contender? If Bednar were healthy, we'd be wondering if he was going to get traded. I would love to see the Pirates mature into that legitimate contender we've all been waiting for. They have is Brian Reynolds ever going to take that step forward? O'Neal Cruz has kind of had a disappointing year. If you roster Chapman, just hope to look at, he's like, you follow him on the ticker. You're like, oh, the Pirates won 5-3 today. Maybe that's a Chapman save. Do not watch him live. It will basically ruin your heart rate.
Yes. And we can talk about conflicting feelings of rooting for him too, given off-field stuff, but that's a separate conversation. The last closer detail is that Jordan Romano was shut down from throwing after he was just doing long toss. So he wasn't even really ramping up to like heavy bullpen work. He was doing long toss. He felt an issue in the elbow that he's out with right now. So they shut him down. Jimmy Garcia is already he's not shut down. He is out with an elbow injury of his own. He is ramping back up, and there's an expectation he could be back in a week. We obviously need to see how that goes. So it feels like Chad Green is the guy in Toronto right now. He might be the guy for a week. I'm kind of curious what you're thinking about this situation for the long term, because I am very pessimistic about Jordan Romano for the rest of the season. He was hurt at the start of the year. He came back. He's hurt again. It's elbow, which is never a good thing. He can't even get through long toss without the pain right now. So I expect him to be sidelined for at least a month to 2 at the absolute best case scenario here. And the Blue Jays are not competitive. So maybe they let Yimi Garcia and Chad Green close for a little bit, but maybe they also get rid of him and turn the reins over to somebody like Nate Pearson in the second half of the season. Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned Nate Pearson. Chad Green is a short-term play here for me, but Nate Pearson would be the longer term, and he fits that the kind of the frame of a closer. A lot of times, a failed starter who had a high pedigree, who's transitioning to the relief role. You could imagine being a dominant pitcher, maybe in that closer spot. Chad Green's kind of the opposite. I talked about Chapman, the high strikeout rate, but he's going to walk everybody. Chad Green's the opposite. He doesn't have that strikeout rate you look for in a closer, but he has good control. So at least he's going to force people to beat him by putting the ball in play. He'll be fine. If they could get anything for Chad Green, I don't see why Toronto wouldn't put almost everybody on the market. I don't know how they're going to handle their stars, but all of their secondary players, all of their veterans, all of their players in their 30s. It's Chad Green is 33 this year. If he's available probably for, some batting practice balls, if people want him, as Toronto's been one of the most disappointing teams in baseball. And I co-sign what you said about the idea that with them going nowhere, there's no reason to rush Romano back. I don't think he pitches again this season.
Yeah. Nate Pearson has kind of vaulted to near the top of my, chance and a prayer, like $1 stash with him and Ben Joyce, who's back up for the Angels and looks pretty good. And those are two teams that are probably going to deal away their closers, or should. And if Romano doesn't come back, that adds to that as well. So just two young guys to keep an eye on. If you have that roster spot, you can throw them on and see what happens over the next month. Another injury, which is sadly not a surprise because he seems to get hurt every year, but Giancarlo Stanton on the IL with a hamstring injury. He himself said 4 weeks. So I think we assume 4 weeks as the best case scenario, and there could be more time. Sadly, Jason Dominguez, who is tearing up AAA, is out for, at this point, it's probably like 6 to 7 more weeks with an oblique injury. He would have been the easy kind of call up to take Stanton's place. It seems like, as of right now against right-handed pitching, they're going to play Trent Grisham in center field. They're going to move Aaron Judge to DH in those games, and they'll kind of continue business as usual. The Yankees did pick up J.D. Davis over the weekend. My personal opinion is that is more to do with the struggles of DJ LeMahieu and the injury to Anthony Rizzo, and it gives them an extra bat to kind of potentially move around the infield. But I think we're going to see a lot of Trent Grisham in response to the Giancarlo Stanton injury. And I'm curious if you care in certain formats. He's not hitting well this year, but we do know that he has a little bit of pop and is a lefty, and in Yankee Stadium, that could be something useful. And the glove will play in center field. So maybe like 15 team leagues, or just kind of AL only for you.
Yeah. Grisham was not somebody I bid on. I'm just too much swing and miss in his game. I see him as going to be like an OPS plus like 85 or so. I don't know how the Yankees are doing it, by the way. Second best offense by runs scored. Obviously, Judge is a monster. Soto's a monster. The fact that they've gotten 69 games out of Giancarlo Stanton at this point, that's a huge win for them. I mean, he's already got 18 home runs. I think most people probably projected he'd hit about 20 home runs in a full season. And who knows, maybe he'll end at 18. You never know with him coming back. But they had just so many average players here. Verdugo is average. Trevino isn't a bad hitting catcher. Cabrera, it sounds like it's going to get sent down to the minors. They want to send him a message, I guess. We do like Anthony Volpe, but he's been good. He hasn't maybe been the great player that I want him to be. I'm not going to touch Grisham. I don't think there's a winner here. Stanton's hurt. I don't see anybody coming into fantasy value in a traditional mixed league.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Ben Rice later on. I did put bids in on Grisham in an AL only league. I think that's that's a format where I'm happy to put a bid in on anybody who's going to start regularly on an offense that's good. But I think that might be the extent of it. The big news of today, Monday, is that the Orioles called back up Heston Kjerstad, who's one of their top prospects, who was raking in AAA. But interestingly, everybody expected the corresponding move to be the demotion of Colton Cowser, who's really struggled since the beginning of May. But Cowser was not the corresponding move. He remains on the roster. So it seems like in order for Kjerstad to play regularly, they'll have to straight up bench Cowser, which is certainly possible. But then begs the question, if your plan was to just bench him, why not send him down to AAA to let him get everyday at bats? So I don't know if you have any confidence in this situation, because the Orioles have kind of been doing this to us all year. And at some point, I know we trust them. They're a great organization. They've drafted really well. At some point, you just have to wonder if this is not the right course of action for these young hitters to get shuffled back and forth and up and down constantly.
Right. I mean, they should be playing every day somewhere, as you said, whether it's AAA at the major league level. Does Cedric Mullins profile to be a great defensive player? Because he's the one negative in their offense. Everybody else who's a regular player for them is a plus offensive player. And there he is with a 77 OPS plus. He had that one great season a couple of years ago. That's all now seen as a mirage. The Orioles, man, they have too many. Their organization is so deep. I'd love to see if they flip one of these guys. Well, not one of their. They're not going to trade Rutschman or Henderson or somebody like that. They're not going to trade Jackson Holiday, but maybe one of their second or third tier prospects and get that pitching help that they need. I don't think there's anything wrong with their lineup. Anything they roll out there is going to be a plus lineup, even though they just had a horrible weekend in Houston. But I wish. Here's the thing: I had to drop Cowser in a couple of leagues in recent weeks. I didn't want to do that, but the production had really tailed off, and now he had become a chore. I had to monitor the Baltimore lineup every day just to make sure he was in it.
Yeah, it's tough. The Mullins thing was, I was convinced that not convinced. I felt like he was going towards losing his job, but he's kind of saved it the last few weeks. He's really turned the corner the last few weeks. In particular, in June, he's hitting 271 over 16 games. Like, that is not elite, but that's way better than what we were seeing before.
271 today's baseball is actually really good.
Striking out
average like 245 or whatever it is. I mean, yeah, that's great.
Striking out just 12.7% of the time, 5 stolen bases, just 1 home run. As he's kind of he's lowered the pull rates and the fly ball rates a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. But I did think that was kind of the problem with Mullins, was he was selling out for power a lot, and there was no real reason to be hitting so many fly balls. I mean, I would say still in June, this is in the 16 games in June, he has a 24% infield fly ball percentage. That's stupid. That's so high. It is like, I just don't know that he's fixed. I know he's had a really good stretch. I don't know that he's fixed. But you're not benching him when he's playing this well. And the speed is obviously, a really strong asset for you. I do think the Orioles need to make a move. I will say what I found interesting was the corresponding move for Heston Kjerstad was that they DFA'd Nick Maton, which took Nick Maton off the 40-man roster, which means the Orioles 40-man roster is now at just 39 players, and their top pitching prospect remaining in the minor, well, at the higher levels of the minors since they called up Cade Povich, is Chase McDermott, who is currently at AAA and not on the 40-man roster. So if the Orioles wanted to give Chase McDermott a shot, because, the starting rotation is a little bit of a mess, they'd have to add him to the 40-man roster. This opens up that possibility. McDermott has a 3.84 ERA in 70 innings at AAA this year. It does come with a 146 whip because he does have some control issues, but it also comes with a near 33% strikeout rate. He has 101 strikeouts in 70 innings at AAA. There are reliever risk concerns here because of that command, but I just found that interesting of saying, here's the next guy up. He needs to be added to the 40-man if they're going to give him a shot. Now they have a spot on the 40-man. I'm not saying it's a lock to happen. By the time you listen to this, they may have already added somebody else, but it does open up that possibility. And as we've talked about so many times on this show, if a starting pitcher with strikeout upside is getting a shot on the Orioles, I'm intrigued because the team context and the ballpark are great.
For sure. Really good connecting of the dots by you, which is why you're a good fantasy player. Just cleaning up a couple things with the Orioles. I don't think we get to talk about it last week. Kyle Bradish, Tommy John surgery. He's out for the year, which, again, just a gaping hole in the rotation. I think the fact they get anything from him this year was a little bit of a surprise. When those guys go the rest in rehab, it's hard to trust. And I like the point you made on Mullins, and this is a point I was making with JP Crawford in a pickup piece I did today, where sometimes guys get off to such horrible starts that when they start to play better, because their stats were buried at such an ugly place, that you don't realize that the trend is positive. As you mentioned, Mullins is making better contact this month. He's hitting for a decent average. He's stolen bases all year. So a lot of times you have to see past. And I realize some people say, well, it's arbitrary endpoints. You can almost move the goalposts anywhere you want, say anything you want. But when somebody's been productive lately, if nothing else, it marks their territory in the lineup. Sometimes it reflects a technical change that they've made or some adjustment that they've made. It isn't always true. I mean, you can look in the clouds and see patterns if you stare long enough. But the case of Mullins is it's important to see sometimes the trend of a player more than the overall seasonal flow of a player.
Yeah. Sticking in what is this organization doing news, the Marlins placed Jesus Luzardo now on the 60-day IL. At first, it was just going to be 4 weeks. Then it was 4 to 6 weeks. Then he was placed on the 60-day IL with a back injury. That is, that's 2 weeks. And I'm think that maybe now I'm looking. The rumor was the 60-day IL. Yeah, back injury, 60-day IL. Really saps his trade value, which is a conversation for another time. They also placed Braxton Garrett on the 15-day IL with a left forearm strain. He's battled arm issues all year. Still no Max Meyer. It has to be Max Meyer. No, like that's kind of my note to you here. It has to be, right. They cannot keep running out guys like Kyle Tyler and Roddery Munoz and Sean Anderson. Like at some point, they have to let Max Meyer get starts with no other healthy pitchers.
I mean, I would hope so. I mean, first of all, he's 25. It's not like they're babying somebody who's 20 or 21, right? And he looked good when he came up earlier, right? He had 3 decent starts. It's sad to see Braxton Garrett, by the way, who I cut like a week or 2 ago. I was holding out hope. Guys who get strikeouts by volume and are constantly around the plate, I have a little bit of a soft spot for those. The George Kirby's, the Logan Webbs, and Braxton Garrett is a much lesser version of that, but he was pitching very poorly and he's hurt, so he became an easy cut. But the problem with the Marlins is I talk about in a season where almost everybody is in playoff contention, the Marlins are not. I mean, they have 27 wins. They're one of the 3 or 4 worst teams in baseball. So I don't know why they're not. Meyer's 25. Let him come up and pitch, man. I mean, what do you can't like keep your birthday cake in the freezer forever. At some point you have to eat it. And it's just frustrating that they're handling it this way, but still I will hold on to him in some of my leagues. And you know, you can't, a lot of times you do it and you're kind of spiting yourself because maybe the team's objective is something different than what makes sense. But I would think Max Meyer should have 10 starts coming at some point, and I want to be in on those.
Me too. I agree. Last kind of semi-major bit of news is that Eloy Jimenez came off the IL on Sunday, played 1 game, looked like he could barely run, said that he was experiencing general soreness, and they're evaluating what they're going to do with him. He apparently was not this sore when he was playing in his rehab games, and now he's sore. I get the theoretical upside when he's active. I cut him in a league last night because I was just like, I'm not going to do the dance of, and it's an OPS league too. So like his power really plays in that format. But I was just like, I'm not going to do the dance of this. He's not healthy. You watch him play. He cannot run. Like, I just don't know how the White Sox are going to put him out there. I feel like an IL stint is coming. I can't do that dance anymore with Eloy Jimenez.
I mean, he's 27 going on 37. He's a free agent in one of my leagues that has bidding on Sundays, and then there's a first come, first serve. And I see the list of free agents. I see Eloy Jimenez. My first thought, oh yeah, Eloy Jimenez. I'm like, wait a minute. I have to cut somebody for him. I'm not picking up Eloy Jimenez. Eric, I'm at a point now where I think the best player on this offense might be Tommy Pham, who's 36. It feels like he's 46. He's played for like half the teams in baseball this decade. He's a perfect, immaculate grid answer, but there he is with, OPS plus 107. He's got a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. If you prorate his numbers to a full season, he probably have about 90 runs scored. Chicago's still worst team in baseball, worst lineup in baseball. Eloy Jimenez is just somebody who's just destined to have a checkered career. I mean, this team a few years ago, we talk about the Blue Jays, like what happened, right? This team was supposed to be a monster team. The White Sox were that team too. They had all these prospects, they were going to have like 5 or 6 all-stars in their offense, and almost nobody has hit the high end of their range. Robert has been pretty good when healthy, but I mean, a huge disappointment with Jimenez, a huge disappointment with Moncada. Tim Anderson out of nowhere just totally fell off the map, and now he's at a little bit of a moment in Miami, but his career is probably on the final couple of holes. So I'll give you the approval if you want Tommy Pham to pick up. Yeah. And every once in a while I kick I'll play Gavin Sheets for a week, and then I don't want to do that. I'll play Paul DeJong for a week because I have injuries, and I'll cut him when my guys get healthy again. But for the most part, the great use of the White Sox is that their pitching staff is surprisingly good. Yes. And I know that you've gotten some mileage. I think in the Friends and Family League, you picked up one of their guys.
I think I had Thorpe for this week.
You picked up Thorpe, that great changeup, right? Crochet and Fetty have been terrific.
Yeah. And Jonathan Cannon looked great for a stretch and then got destroyed by the Tigers this week.
Underhanded against the Tigers, yeah. But for the most part, the White Sox exist so we can stream against them.
Yeah. I will say in hindsight, I mean, listen, you can talk all you want about the Red Sox trade of Chris Sale this offseason and how Vaughn Grissom has been hurt and it didn't work out because Sale has been healthy. But getting Chris Sale for Yohan Moncada and Michael Kopech was also a highway robbery by the Red Sox at the time when everybody thought those two guys were going to be just massive stars. And it's another in a long line of examples that when high-end prospects get dealt, it's important not to overreact because you never know how those guys are going to develop.
The mistake the Red Sox made was extending Sale. I mean,
exactly.
What they got on the front end was terrific. Then he was a Cy Young contender for the first couple of years. He was part of a championship team, and then it's good to see. I have no idea how long it's going to last, but I mean, he currently leads the majors in wins. His ERA is 2.91. His peripherals say it should even be better than that. And he's basically Chris Sale again, and it's just nice to see it. I mean, this is a guy who was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and then it just all went wrong for like 3 or 4 years. So good for Atlanta and good for Sale. Yeah,
I'm going to give you, we got a bunch of quick hit notes here. I'm going to go through them all as fast as I can, and you just jump in at the end. Let me know if there's anything here that you want to add on to. Wilson Contreras is allegedly going to be activated today, Monday. So keep an eye on that as the day goes on or throughout the week, but he should be coming back this week. Nolan Arenado received an injection to treat nerve pain in his left forearm. And that was over the weekend. And then the Cardinals were going to continue to evaluate him. He's obviously not had a great season. And anytime you're treating nerve pain in your arm, that's not a great sign. Josh Jung of the Rangers took the weekend off after dealing with soreness in his wrist, but the Rangers said he was going to go through BP again on Tuesday and then could return immediately after that. He had already been doing rehab starts, so this might not actually delay Josh Jung. So don't overreact when you hear soreness in his wrist. He may still come back this week, depending on how the BP goes on Tuesday. Yu Darvish was set to be activated for a start on Tuesday, and now the Padres are saying that there's like another issue that is apparently not related to his groin that might delay him, and they're going to have an update at some point on Monday. That update has not come yet, but keep that in mind. Mike Clevenger is going to be back this week. He's going to bump one of Jonathan Cannon and Drew Thorpe out of the rotation for the White Sox. Yesterday's start may make that Jonathan Cannon, but we'll have to see what happens there. Clayton Kershaw is experiencing shoulder soreness as he's going through his rehab. We talked about that a little bit last week, and you were not entirely convinced that Kershaw would make it back, and this is not a great start for him. Gabriel Moreno of the Diamondbacks is on the IL, and David Fry of the Guardians is day-to-day with elbow soreness. So those are two catcher-eligible players who are banged up, and we might not see them this week. Starling Marte is experiencing knee pain, and he's having his knee evaluated today now that the Mets are back in New York. As we mentioned, the Mets only have 5 games this week, so we'll have to see how those evaluations go, but it might be an IL stint for Marte coming up. Mike Yastrzemski was placed on the IL, and the Giants called back up Luis Matos. And I know you might see Luis Matos and think, oh, Matos, because he had that huge stretch with the Giants at the beginning of the month. He really cooled down. And remember that Austin Slater is back up right now, so that will cut into some playing time for Luis Matos. And then the Reds said Matt McLain is about to start swinging soon, and an August return seems likely for Matt McLain. That's still a ways away, but just a piece of good news to add in there. Anything on any of those guys you feel like you want to add?
Yeah, just a couple of quick notes. Josh Smith has been hitting so well in Texas that I'd like to think that he still has a job even when Jung comes back. He can play a couple of different positions, and now that maybe Jung isn't ready right away, I don't cut bait on Josh Smith. I'm going to still play him in my weekly leagues. I think he's found a long-term hole here, a spot here. I don't know that Patrick Bailey is on our waiver wire list, but a lot of people might need a catcher because they lost Moreno, they lost Fry, and I think Patrick Bailey has been under rostered in Yahoo for like a solid 2 or 3 weeks now. He's getting good lineup real estate in San Francisco. He's one of the few catchers who's actually going to help your batting average. And just what we need is Matt McLain to come back, and I don't know what they're going to do with Marte. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but that Reds lineup is going to, if most of that lineup becomes healthy, man, is it going to be a really difficult jigsaw puzzle?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And we said it was going to be that at the start of the season, and it wasn't, but maybe it will be down the stretch. So we're going to get into the big waiver names now. But before we do that, it's the ultimate tryout for the toughest team to make. Elite athletes from all over the country compete for a chance to join Team USA in Paris. But only the best will be selected. Watch the U.S. Olympic team trials today through June 30th on NBC and Peacock. That's until June 30th on NBC and Peacock. I've been checking those out. Katie Ledecky is amazing, just crushing people in the water right now. It's wild to see, what she's doing. And it's cool. We're getting a sense. Sha'Carri Richardson, we're getting a sense of some of the getting into the Olympics, which I love.
It's not far away. Paris is what late July, right? July 26th, I think, is the first day of the Paris Olympics. So, yeah, I'm getting excited too. It's just one of those things where there's always something to watch, and it's athletes that you don't get to see that often, so it feels more like a unique experience when they're back. And Katie Ledecky, absolute swimming god.
We're going to start the waiver thing with Ben Rice, since we alluded to him earlier on when we talked about the Yankees. Ben Rice is catcher eligible because he was a catcher in the minor leagues, but started playing first base. The Yankees have called him up to play first base with Rizzo down. Interestingly, Ben Rice, who is a left-handed hitter, started three of four games against lefties this week and actually handled himself pretty well. The BABIP he was running at AAA is high, and his zone contact rate in AAA was not great. So I don't know that you're going to get like a tremendous batting average here, but his plate discipline, his eye at the plate is really good, and he's got left-handed power in Yankee Stadium. I think in leagues where he is catcher eligible, in particular, he was really popular in NFBC formats because it's a 2-catcher league, and you're getting a first baseman who's playing catcher, and so you're going to get that everyday playing time. I think he was a really popular ad. I tried to get him in a couple of places, but the bids, were like 60, 70, $80. And I just didn't need a catcher high enough to go that high. This is an $1,000 fab budget. So you're talking about like 7-8% of your budget. Start of the season budget, not even depending on where you are now. I'm curious your overall interest level in Ben Rice.
Definitely interested. Yeah, we need more Dartmouth College, Ivy League players in Major League Baseball. And he's got that lefty swing like it in Yankee Stadium. I got to figure at some point he moves ahead of LeMahieu in the lineup, and obviously Stanton's going to be out for a while now. So I wouldn't be turned off by the fact that he's hitting 6th, 7th, or 8th, because I think he could easily move up to somewhere in the middle of the order where he's connected to Soto and Judge, and that's where the run production is. And you hit on the key point of all. Not only can he hit, but we love catcher-eligible players who aren't saddled with having to catch, and that's what Ben Rice is.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason, like, it's not in NFBC formats, but Tyler Soderstrom is really popular. We'll get to him in a little bit. I'm curious how you would rank these catchers in 2-catcher league formats, because they were the most added players this weekend. It was Ben Rice. It was Kyle Higashioka of the Padres, now that Luis Campusano is on the IL. Ben Rortvedt of the Rays, and Freddie Fermin of the Royals. So between Rice, Higashioka, Rortvedt, and Fermin, how do you rank those 4 guys?
Yeah, I think I'd bump Fermin into the 3rd spot, but other than that, the order that you listed them is the order I like them.
Yeah, I think I put Fermin over Higashioka in the 2 spot, but other than that, that would be my change as well. Let's talk about Tyler Soderstrom, because we mentioned him. He is catcher eligible in certain formats because he's another guy who came up as a catcher, but has played exclusively first base for the A's and played some first base last year. That's why some leagues don't have him with catcher eligibility. He starts every day at first base. He was added as a first baseman, not just within leagues where he has catcher eligibility, because over the last 14 games, he's hitting .304 with 5 home runs, 8 runs, and 12 RBIs. We have seen certain Oakland players get hot and then kind of fade out. And I'm just curious your level of interest in Tyler Soderstrom.
Yeah, he's the new Scott Hatterberg, right? Former catcher. Now he's a first baseman, decent OBP. I just recently was on a plane and I was looking at a way to kill the last half hour, and like, what movies do they have? And they had Moneyball. So I'm a huge Philip Seymour Hoffman fan. So I watched some of the Philip Seymour Hoffman scenes. I saw
him on the subway in New York, 6 months before he died, but it was always one of those things where, like, I want to go up and say something to you, but I'm not going to, because you're just trying to be a normal person on the train. But I love his work.
That's very cool. Yeah, he's my favorite actor of all time. The fact that he was not Academy Award nominated for the 9.5 minutes in Almost Famous, where he's in 4 scenes and he absolutely crushes every one of them. But also Moneyball, it's adorable that they just don't want to mention that, they had these 3 ace starters, and Miguel Tejada was the AL MVP that year. Eric Chavez was like on a Hall of Fame trajectory in his 20s. They had a lot of star players on that team. They want to make it about Scott Hatterberg. Here's the thing, 2024 A's. It's not a fun team, right? They got one of the worst lineups in baseball. The park stinks. I don't know where they're going to play in the future. Is it going to be Vegas? Is it going to be Sacramento? It seems like Oakland is a dead market for them. It's really sad. It's a great baseball history there. The top half of their lineup: Tyler Soderstrom, 136 OPS plus; JJ Bleday, 134 OPS plus; Brent Rooker, 140 OPS plus. I still think Geloff, I know his numbers are terrible right now. I still think he's a decent hitter. This could be a lineup where maybe it goes 4 or 5 deep, and it's a case of you don't look. Okay, yeah, the bottom half of it's going to be terrible, but and who knows? Maybe something we always talk about with the non-contenders. Maybe Brent Rooker would be interesting to a contender or something like that. But Bleday was somebody I wrote about in my waiver column. I think he's under rostered. Soderstrom, of course. I mean, everything you point to, he looks real to me. Rooker, we kind of know what he is. I don't think the batting average is going to stick, but he might be able to hit for a league batting average, steal the occasional base, and hit like 25 home runs. I don't mind the top half of this lineup.
Yeah, I picked up Bleday in a couple formats. I had picked up Charlie Blackmon last week for the full Rockies at home, only for him to hurt his hamstring and play no games, which was just absolutely tremendous.
Lots of fun.
But I added Bleday because Bleday has been good for about a month now. And you're not getting, it's a 15-team league. You're not getting tons of like counting stat production, but I like him. I think you're treating Tyler Soderstrom a little bit like you were treating Brent Rooker, which is the power is real. There will be hot stretches. You can roster him for the hot stretches because it will prop up the rest of the stats. But this is not a set it and forget it type of ad, unless of course he's catcher eligible in a league where you really need like multiple catchers, because he's going to play every day. And that really in the middle of the lineup, and that does add some value in that regard, but not as much for me as a corner infielder. I'd almost rather have the next guy as a corner infielder, and that's Jose Miranda, who even with Royce Lewis back is still playing a lot for the Twins, has started 8 of the last 9 games for the Twins. Over the last 28 games, Jose Miranda's hitting .290 with 8 runs, 18 RBIs, and 4 home runs. He broke out a couple years ago in the minors. We saw there were some defensive issues. There were some, contact issues, but he's put together a pretty solid season overall. And just the fact that he continues to play in that lineup, which when they're healthy is, a pretty good lineup. I have no issues with this. The Twins, I don't see a reason why they would stop being cautious with Royce Lewis, right? Like Royce Lewis DH'd 3 games last week and started at third 3 games last week. I kind of feel like that's what they're going to do. And that will give Jose Miranda the opportunity to keep playing 5 games a week. And so I think he could certainly still be rostered.
Yeah, I feel like this team needs 3 or 4 DHs so they can keep Buxton out of harm. And I have Buxton on a couple of teams. Maybe it's just one team, and you just never know when he's playing, even if he just had a big game, because they just don't want to overuse him. And that Royce Lewis comeback, I mean, the guy's played 18 games. He has 10 home runs. He was a former number 1 overall pick. His OPS is 1.262. Royce Lewis is great, but they're just so afraid of him getting hurt. Carlos Correa, I got to take a big L on him. I thought he was like a terrible pick this year, and he's having a great season. It's nice to see him back. He'll probably make the All-Star team. This is a good team. I thought that maybe the Tigers could steal this division. I thought Cleveland was Cleveland's actually really good. I thought the Twins were Cleveland's actually really good. I thought the Royals were a year away. They might make the playoffs. So good work by me. I did have the White Sox being terrible like everybody else did, but this is a fun lineup. The only problem is you have to grind it every day.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Willie Castro might hit first. He might hit 7th. He might hit 9th. He might not be playing. They will give Buxton a day or 2 off every week. They're going to handle Lewis carefully. But I like Miranda. I liked him 2 years ago. And, last year it was a poor season, but he didn't play that. He was hurt. He hardly played. I see no reason why he can't be a plus offensive player, and he qualifies at a position that isn't that deep. I think he'll hold full season value.
Yeah, they platoon more than any team, and they platoon aggressively. Like half their lineup sits. I will say about Buxton, I had him on this rundown because I was surprised. Buxton has only sat 3 times the entire month of June. So you're right that they'll sit him once a week, but so far they've been sitting him once a week. And that it is not really all that harmful to fantasy value, considering he's playing center field all of these games. He's also running again. Over the last 11 games, Buxton is hitting .333 with 2 home runs, 7 runs, 9 RBIs, and 2 steals. He's the 49th ranked player in Yahoo formats over the last 2 weeks, which are those 11 games for him. Now, if you look under the hood, he's not hitting the ball exceptionally hard. Nothing has changed in the sense of like, oh, Buxton's on a heater. Like, look at the barrel rate, look at the plate discipline improvements. But what you're seeing is a guy who's healthy enough to be in the lineup 6 out of 7 games a week, who is healthy enough to steal 2-3 bases, over the course of a week. Let's say 2 bases a week, and still has some pop. And so it's like built on a house of cards that might collapse at any moment. But I think it's an interesting waiver wire ad if you're acknowledging that it might collapse at any moment, because there aren't many players with his athleticism and upside who are just sitting on your wire, and maybe you get 3 really good weeks before it vanishes.
Totally reasonable. I realize this might not be easy to do, but if you had him and you could find a market for him, and it may have to be like you've put him in to finish a trade. You're not going to like trade Byron Buxton and get some huge haul. I get that, but I can't get past the fact, this blows my mind. He's played 100 games in a season once.
Yeah.
And that was 7 years ago. And now they're asking.
Perfect trade guy if you have him currently on your roster. Perfect.
Right. I think you could use him as a sweetener. I don't think he's going to be a prime. Everybody in your league has had Byron Buxton at one point and regretted it. Now, I mean, there are some seasons. I mean, back in 2021, he's a monster, 171 OPS plus, 19 home runs, 9 stolen bases in 61 games. Imagine what that full season would have looked like. What's surprising to me is that he's been healthy, and his OPS plus is right around league average where it was last year. He's just like kind of just another guy now. The OBP is still under 300, which is low, but because he's playing center field, and he's also batting 7th, by the way, they really haven't moved him up in the lineup at all. I just feel like at some point it's going to go bad for Buxton. I hate saying that. He was a number 1 overall pick. He was the prospect in baseball. He was somebody who we saw as a future MVP. The 1 year he did play that full season, he won a Gold Glove. He'd have more of them if he could just, play 5 months a year, which he hasn't been able to do. I just feel like it's inevitable. The other shoe is going to drop. And again, people in your league are competitive. They have the internet too. It's not like anybody's banging your door down for Buxton, but if I needed to get a trade done and Buxton was the guy who pushed it over the top, I'd have no trouble throwing. You pick him up, but I'd be looking to try to trade him if I could.
I agree. I'll move a guy up so we can end our Twins segment.
Yep.
But I want to know why people aren't picking up Carlos Santana. He was not one of the more added players this weekend. He's just 30% rostered in Yahoo, standard 5x5 format. However, he is the 54th ranked player in Yahoo formats over the last month. In the 26 games over the last month, he's hitting .325 with 5 home runs, 13 runs, 16 RBIs, and even 2 steals to throw in for good measure. I understand that Santana has run poor batting averages in his career, so people see the .325 and they say it's not sustainable, and that's totally valid. But he has also always been really strong, like kind of near the top end in terms of his understanding of the strike zone, and the power has played for years. So he's getting everyday at bats. He is their first baseman every day. He doesn't get platoon because he switch hits, so he'll get a day off here and there, but he is their first baseman. He hits 5th in the lineup. He's hitting for power. He's getting RBIs in a solid lineup. I just don't understand why people aren't saying this is a perfect corner infielder for me.
Yeah, just because he's 38 years old, he's been around forever. Remember, he was the big catching prospect with he's on the Dodgers trade to Cleveland back around 2009, 2010. But almost every year, OPS plus above 100. Walk and strikeout rate is always in a good place. The power is good. The lineup is good. The lineup real estate is good. Yeah, I mean, he's just a player who's aged really well. His skills have aged really well, and I don't see anything he's doing right now that feels over his skis. He's certainly not going to be like a dominant player for you, but like a utility corner, somebody you use as you play him on the Mondays and Thursdays when not everybody plays. He should be on a roster, and he's been underappreciated just because people are like, oh, yeah, Carlos Santana, he's still in the league, right? He's playing for somebody. People just at some point they hit an age. A couple of years ago, his batting average got under 200. I mean, people are like, okay, Carlos Santana is done. No, Carlos Santana is not done. He's still a plus offensive player.
Yeah, that batting average may go down to 240, 250, and that's fine because he's still giving you the rest of the production in a lot that's getting healthy and good. Let's move to some outfielders to end our segment here. Actually, you know what? We'll move to outfielders. Let's talk about Chas McCormick. McCormick was a big pickup. A lot of people were really in on McCormick at the start of the year, and then he got injured and the playing time wasn't there, and people kind of fell out of favor. But he started 4 of the last 5 games. Kyle Tucker is still battling this mysterious shin injury. We don't know when he's going to come back. Jake Myers has really kind of cooled down. So McCormick is getting regular playing time. He's 4 for 12 over those 4 games last week with 2 home runs, 4 runs, 3 RBIs, and 1 steal. Are you back in on Chas McCormick, or do you still feel like his grasp on a job is tenuous?
Can I be both of those things? I think his grasp on the job is tenuous, but this is not the Houston lineup we've grown up with, right? They finally cut Jose Abreu, but they don't really have an answer at first base. Jonathan Singleton is a below-average player. Edwin Diaz had a disappointing year. At least Bregman started to hit. He got off to a horrible start, but he's kind of saved their bacon since Kyle Tucker has been hurt. Alvarez is a monster, of course. Pena's been okay. Altuve's been good. But this team may not make the playoffs. They have found a way for McCormick and Myers to play at the same time, and they're just looking for answers. This used to be a lineup that went 9 deep. Now it feels like it's a lineup that goes 5 deep. But McCormick still profiles as a guy in a full season, I would think would hit like 15 to 18 home runs, steal like 8 to 12, 15 bases, something like that. Not a bad defensive player. So yeah, it's a short leash, but it's not like Jake Myers has been promised anything. He was good for a while. He slumped at the wrong time. McCormick has a big week. Right now there's a spot for both of them. This is one of those, you pick it up, you throw it against the wall, you see if it sticks. And that's what I'm doing with McCormick.
I agree. If I can make this as a short-term ad, I'm happy to do it. My hope is, but I guess Tucker's going to come up play the corner. Like my hope is that Joey Lopito gets a shot to stay in the lineup even after Tucker's back. And I could see that happening, but one of Myers or McCormick is going to have to play center. And so maybe it remains McCormick. We'll see. I was shocked that Hunter Goodman was one of the most added players across most league types yesterday. Now I understand that he hit 5 home runs, has hit 5 home runs over his last 11 games, and he plays in Coors. And so people wanted to pick him up, but he's also coming off a week where he played the entire week at Coors. And even in that entire week at Coors, he had good power numbers, but he hit 208 during the entire week at home. I just don't know that he's a guy you can play on the road. So I was surprised that he got picked up when they're going on the road this week and only have 5 games as well. Is Hunter Goodman, and I guess I'll extend this to Michael Toglia, who wasn't on here but kind of fits the same bill. Are those guys that you would roster when they're not in Coors? Do you see value in their bats?
I'm not even sure I'd play Goodman at home. I know the power was there, but he's hitting 196. He's got 3 walks against 28 strikeouts. Not going to run much. It's not a good lineup. This is another team where it's like 3 or 4 guys you can feel good about, and the rest of the lineup you can't. No, I'm Toglia. You maybe could talk me into. Hunter Goodman is somebody I didn't even place token bids for.
We're on the same page there. Last guy before we go to some quick hitters. Actually, no, we'll do our outfielders first. I'm going to give you 4 outfielders who were among the most added players this weekend. Tell me if you just trust any of these guys. Would you be interested in picking up any of these guys? Let's call it just tell me in a 12 or 15 team league. It was Will Brennan of the Guardians, Dominic Canzone of the Mariners, Jose Siri of the Rays, and Jesus Sanchez of the Marlins. Do you have interest in any of those guys?
Yeah, Brennan's the one guy I do. The other 3 I don't, although I will say Jose Siri made 2 of the best catches I've seen all season in the same game. He's an unbelievable defensive player, but has some category juice, can hit for a poor average. Brennan tied to a really good Cleveland lineup I'm interested in.
I am a Jesus Sanchez believer. I love me some Jesus Sanchez. I understand that he sits against all lefties, so you do have to like look at what their schedule is. I picked him up in a lot of leagues last week because the Marlins this past week played only against righties. This is a guy with a 13% barrel rate on the year. He hits the ball hard, just a 23% strikeout rate, which is pretty good for somebody that has that kind of power. His zone contact on his career is about 84%. So this isn't like a major swing and miss guy. He does have some swing and miss because he does, sell out for power a little bit. He's been a little over aggressive at times this year. I would love to see Jesus Sanchez get traded. I want him on another team that in the deadline because I think his power plays. He can't really play. He's a fine but not great defender. He's like you throw him in the corner. But I think when the Marlins are playing mainly right-handed pitching, I like adding Jesus Sanchez. They face 3 lefties this week, but they have 7 games. So he's going to get 4 starts. So I put some token. I kept him in some leagues where I was like, okay, if I get 4 games of him, I'm okay with that. But he is unfortunately a guy you shuffle on and off of your roster. But I think he deserves a little bit of love. And I didn't put any bids on Dominic Canzone, but I do know that people, that people like him because he has shown pop before. He does have a 12% barrel rate this year, which is nice. There's just a lot of strikeout in that game so far this year, which has kept the batting average down. But he's on my radar, not to add right now, but I'm circling Dominic Canzone.
Yeah, you mentioned that lefty schedule the following week, and this can always change with rain and with injuries and stuff. It looks like 5 out of 6 Miami opponents will have a right-handed starter. Might be a better Sanchez. We can also, I'm just being teased because I'm looking at Miami's schedule and I see Max Meyer tentatively thrown in for that Thursday start against Zach Wheeler. I was like nothing more than to watch that game. Make it happen, Marlins.
Yeah, they've been, yes, he's been on RotoWire on that like grid for a couple weeks now, and it's driving me crazy. I want to ask you about Spencer Horwitz. Mm-hmm. So Spencer Horwitz had 2 home runs the last game. Hits second when he plays in the Blue Jays lineup, but they seemingly sit him every 3rd game. This is a guy who's hitting 366 in 13 games since being called up with 2 home runs, 6 runs, and 5 RBIs. Why is he not playing every day? And if he starts playing every day, he has to be added, right? I mean, that, the batting average was always going to be there, and he's got a prime spot in that lineup right now. And there could be some fantasy goodness if he can just get in the lineup more than twice every 3 games.
Yeah, Andy Barnes wrote about him late last week for Yahoo. And then when I picked up the baton today, Monday, I wrote about Horwitz, who's percolated up to 10%. The only thing holding him back is that he's not playing every day, but he's just been too hot for even Toronto to ignore. And you would think with maybe some pieces being moved, he's going to be somebody who I think the second half of the year is going to play like 90% of the time. You can't, when you're this productive, you have to be. And at least as you mentioned, he's always at the top of the lineup. Occasionally he hits first, usually he hits second. And isn't it funny in a team where everybody's all pedigree and everybody's all legacy and everybody's dad played and, all that stuff. And he's one guy who doesn't have any of that. He was a late pick and he's the first Horwitz to make the majors and his family and everything. And he's the one guy right now who's hitting the snot out of the ball.
Yeah. I'd love to see him in that lineup. I don't know what the Blue Jays are doing right now. But I mean, listen, I guess their belief in Isaiah
they're bad,
has
man.
led to great production from IKF.
IKF hasn't been bad.
Right.
He qualifies in a bunch of different positions. We gave him a
hard time at the start of the year, admittedly, like, why do they keep playing this guy every day? And he's been playing good defense and playing well, and hats off. It worked, but there's so many dead spots in that lineup right now.
We don't talk about who to cut that often, but is it time?
Cut him.
Yes. I was just going to say, George Springer 191. I cut him a couple of weeks ago. And then somebody picked him up in my league, and I didn't even have that fear of, oh no, he's going to go off for him. I'm like, you know what? Go ruin his batting average. That's fine with me.
I cut him a couple of weeks ago. I added him in add drop hold as my drop last week. Like I'm done. I'm out. I see too many issues in how he's being pitched and how he's adjusting, and the ground ball rate's at a career high, and he's not hitting the ball hard anymore. And I think that even if the ship rights for George Springer, I think that at this stage in his career, he might be a 260 hitter who'll hit 15 homers and 15 steals over the course of a full season if things are breaking right. And that is just somewhere you can find. That's like, I mean, you could find that most places. That's like Tyler Freeman with a slightly better batting average. Like that to me is not somebody who's irreplaceable when things aren't going well.
Still 64% rostered in Yahoo. I think he really should be like in that 20 to 25% range right now. It's only because he's a name player that people recognize.
He has the lowest OPS of qualified hitters in all of Major League Baseball right now. It's wild. I'm going to tell you players who are close to returning. I got a list of players who are close to returning or are moving in the right direction. I just want you to tell me if you're interested in any of these guys in terms of stashing them now. So not like, when they come back, I'll add them. Are any of these guys players who you would want to stash now? So Garrett Mitchell of the Brewers is currently in AAA, is hitting well of late, has, already started, I believe, 5 or 6 games in AAA. So he could be pushing for that debut soon. Michael Massey of the Royals started a rehab assignment last Tuesday after dealing with back injuries. So he should be coming back in the near future as well. Kerry Carpenter of the Tigers is starting baseball activities with his back injury. So no rehab yet, just starting baseball activities. Teammates Tommy Edman and Lars Nootbaar are nearing rehab assignments with their injuries. So once they get rehab assignments, Nootbaar should be up sooner because he's already been up this year. Edman has been out all season with that wrist injury, so you'd expect that rehab assignment to be relatively lengthy. Their teammate Jordan Walker, not injured, but is actually starting to hit home runs at AAA and is hitting the ball well, and so could be pushing for a call-up. Xander Bogaerts has resumed baseball activities. He was supposed to not be back until like late mid-August, and he's now saying July, but who really knows? And then Noelvi Marte is set to return in like a week or two, maybe a week actually, from the suspension, but he has not been playing well on his rehab assignment, though you'd expect him to still come up and play regularly for the Reds. So I'm curious if you're, let's say, waivers this Sunday night, like who are the guys you would start to actively try to stash now?
Yeah, Mitchell and Massey are easy pushes for me. I think the Brewers, what a great story they are going to make him a regular as soon as he comes up, and they have guys that he can easily replace that they always thought Mitchell was better than. Massey was hitting really well when he got hurt. I'm high on him too. I can't let go of Walker because I mean he came up at such a young age. I think they've kind of jerked him around a little bit, but I love the power increase in the minors, as you mentioned. They're another team that could easily be a jigsaw puzzle. There's a lot of different guys there, and you don't know what their lamp's going to be every week. Alec Burleson just had a great week for one of my teams last week, so I'd like to see him stick. But Walker, I think, has a high upside. I can't let go of that. I have Marte in the league where I would love to see him come back and be great right away. I think he might actually, when he's ready to be activated, I think they might keep him in the minors and wait till he actually, I mean, his numbers are horrible. He's got like 1 walk, 13 strikeouts. He hasn't done a thing off a huge layoff. And his resume, it's only like 34 games in the majors. I mean, he was like a top 100 pick. And I'm like, a lot of this is on spec. They have, Candelario's picked it up. He can still hold down third base. They have a lot of guys who kind of, they're hitters. They're not really defensive players. I would hate to pitch for that team, but I'm not convinced that he's automatically a player right away. And Bogaerts is a guy, if I rostered Bogaerts the day he came back, I would try to trade him. He wasn't hitting. He wasn't productive before he got hurt. I think that's a contract that isn't going to age well for all the things that people hammer the Red Sox for. Oh, the Mookie Betts, that whole debacle and everything. And I get it. There's a lot of things that they're not spending money and they're just trying to get these inexpensive short-term rentals. And the team's kind of soulless. They don't have guys who stick. Them letting Bogaerts go or not signing Bogaerts, I'm totally on board with.
Yeah, I'm not touching Bogaerts right now with that fractured shoulder. I don't see a lot of future value in that for this year. I did pick up Mitchell in one league last night. I had a spot I could just stash a bench player in 8 games in AAA since on this rehab. He's hitting .273 with 3 homers and 3 steals in just 8 games. Played center field 4 of those 8 games. I think they expected him to be the starting center fielder, and so I think he's going to be able to get that job maybe in a week or so. I think they'll, they don't want to push it. But yeah, Mitchell for me is another guy I'm hoping to stash. And then I agree with your take on all of these guys. Tommy Edman, I really want to get back in on Kerry Carpenter, but with a back injury, I need to see more than just.
He's always going to platoon too. He's always going to sit against lefties.
Yeah. And the Cardinals situation will be interesting to see play out because Alec Burleson has been really good. Brendan Donovan is coming on. Mason Wynn has been good. If Edman and Nootbaar and Walker are already like, how are they going to divvy up that playing time? It'll be an interesting situation to keep an eye on. We're going to end with a couple of the waiver wire pitchers who were the hottest pickups of the weekend. Before we do that, though, the toughest cycling race of the year is back. The Tour de France takes the world's top cyclists on a mountainous 21-day journey. Stream exclusive coverage all race long starting this Saturday, June 29th at 6:30 a.m. Eastern on Peacock. So if you have a young kid who wakes you up super early in the morning, 6:30 a.m. on Peacock, you can turn on the Tour de France and watch a little cycling.
Make it a full day. Watch the Tour de France that morning, and then maybe watch Breaking Away sometime during the week, the great 1979 movie about Indiana kids who aren't really sure what to do after high school, and one of them is really into cycling. It's a great movie.
You always got the movie recommendations. I love it. I also really like Icarus, which is on Netflix, which is the documentary about cycling, where the guy takes performance enhancing drugs to see if he could basically become a famous cyclist. And then it turns into a crazy political drama about Russia. And recommend it. Love it.
And also Kevin Costner in the 1985 movie American Flyers, another cycling movie.
There you go. We're going to put this section on video on demand so people just get the movie recommendations they can cycle through. Our producer Adam will, get a movie section going.
Maybe we could go, has anybody ever used a 2 thumbs up, 2 thumbs down? Has that ever been used for movie reviews? I'm not sure it has. See if that's available.
We'll see. We'll see if somebody trademarked it. Two veteran pitchers are rejoining their rotations. Michael Wacha came off the IL this week. And so he's back in the Royals rotation. And then with Taijuan Walker on the injured list, Spencer Turnbull is back in the Phillies rotation where he never should have left in the first place. But I'm just curious your interest level in these two pitchers who are now back in their rotations and are just kind of like, veterans who seem to produce and maybe don't have the huge strikeout upside of some of the young whippersnappers we've seen called up of late. But, these are steady eddies.
Yeah, Turnbull gets Detroit this week, so I'm going to immediately punch him up. I'm a little bit more worried about Walker getting a Cleveland lineup they're going to spit on his changeup out of the zone and make him go deep. I just see he's going to go like 4 or 5 innings in that game and probably won't qualify for a win, but maybe more interested in him next week when he gets Tampa Bay. But yeah, Turnbull, I agree with you. Philadelphia, a lot of things have gone right for this team, and they've hit the high end of their range with their rotation with guys out pitching what we expected, but I don't see why Turnbull shouldn't be one of their top 5 guys as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, I was trying to add both of these guys in 15-team leagues this weekend. Turnbull in all leagues because of the Detroit start. Wacha, I think, is just a really great 15-team league type of pitcher because he's just solid. I didn't put this guy on the list because we don't need to analyze it, but I will say Turnbull and Griffin Canning were my 2 big pushes for ads this week for pitching because Canning gets 2 starts, one against Oakland and one against Detroit. You're not really going to get a softer week than that. And I know he pitches for the Angels. It's not a great setup.
Man, ERA over 5 too. I've been scarred by Canning before. I didn't have the nerve to go for that 2-step.
Yeah. If you're listening on Monday afternoon, maybe that's a shot, but I liked those 2 guys. I also liked Spencer Schwellenbach, who I admitted to being like tepid on him. I was big on Hurston Waldrop when I thought it was going to be one of those 2 guys. And Nick Pollock over at Pitcher List kind of talked me into Schwellenbach just about the depth of the arsenal, the 5-pitch mix, the way that he's kind of able to spot his fastball much better than Waldrop was. And so he can get ahead with pitches. And he's got a slider that can miss some bats. And he started out his first couple starts he started this year at like high A. It's like crazy that he's gotten to this point. The start against Washington was fine. His debut, really rough start at Boston, but the last 2 starts, first of all, at Baltimore, 6 innings, 4 hits, 2 runs. And then against Detroit, 6 innings, 3 hits, 1 run. So it's 3 runs allowed over his last 12 innings with 10 strikeouts and 4 walks. It's pretty solid, not spectacular, but pretty solid on a good Braves team. He got 2 starts this week too against St. Louis and against Pittsburgh, which neither is an offense that I'm running from. And so I'm happy to take a gamble on Schwellenbach, and I liked him as a 2-start pitcher this week, but I think he could stick as somebody that maybe you bench when he's facing a really good offense, but that there's some value in his arm.
Yeah, I'm going to co-sign all of that. I wrote him up today and talked about him maybe being one of those temp to perm guys that you pick him up as maybe a 2-start guy or a temporary streamer, but he may pitch well enough that he sticks on your rotation. Again, you'll have to handle him by the schedule. He gets Philadelphia next week. I wouldn't want to pitch him probably against the Phillies, no matter how he does this week. But when ERA and WHIP don't tell the same story, I like to follow the WHIP. The last 2 starts were good. One of them was against Baltimore, as you mentioned, and then 2 offenses below league. I mean, the Cardinals aren't even a top 20 offense right now. It feels like they have a lot of interesting players, but it hasn't added up to a lot of run production. So Schwellenbach was somebody I was trying to get my hands on for the 2 starts this week.
Are you a believer in Tobias Myers, who over the last 4 starts has a 0.71 ERA, a 0.75 WHIP? It does come with just a 20% strikeout rate, but he is filling up the zone. A guy who has been DFA'd by, I think, 4 different organizations, made his MLB debut this year. He has a really flat fastball that he throws up in the zone a lot, which allows it to play up, even though it doesn't have a lot of velocity. The fastball performs better than you would expect because of how flat it is and how well he locates it, which makes him like a decent, it gives him a solid foundation to then mix in his off-speed pitches within the strike zone. He gets the Cubs this week, who have been, a little bit more of a middling offense than we thought they were going to be at the start of the year. Sierra thinks that this is going to regress, and it obviously will, but he's got a 4.16 Sierra over the same span. He has a 0.71 ERA, but I think this might last at least through the Cubs start.
Yeah, this rotation, right? I mean, Freddie Peralta's got star stuff, but everybody else, it feels like there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors. There's a little bit of pound the zone, trust our plus defense. Brewers surprise team in the NL Central, and it looks like they're going to be in a year where they lost their star starter, they lost their head of baseball operations, they lost their manager who got a huge contract with the Cubs and Craig Counsell. I mean, everything was going into rebuild mode, and here they are, winning the division. But it feels like Colin Ray, I feel like he should have an ERA over 5, and it's in the mid 3s. There's in one league where I get offered him every week in trade. I say no, even when he's a throw-in. But Myers is another one of those guys that the 3.12 I don't believe at all. I think it's going to be over 4 in short order. But the Cubs have been such a disappointing. Again, you have to really work the schedule with Myers. I mean, he gets Colorado next week in Colorado. I don't need to tell you what to do with that. But,
exactly.
Chicago's probably borderline for me. If you wanted to go for it, I'd be fine with it. If you thought, okay, well, I see some power bats in that lineup, I could see them maybe going deep on him a couple of times. Milwaukee's still a good home run park, and maybe you steer away from it. He's one of those guys that you pitch him until he burns you once, and then I think you cut him.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of feel the same about the last guy we're going to talk about, which is Miles Mikolas. 2.49 ERA over his last 4 starts. That also comes with a 4.09 Sierra. But 0.75 whip, just an 18.3% strikeout rate. Lance Brozdowski, who does some really good work, has talked about how Mikolas made a change to the release height on his sinker, which has helped his sinker in terms of just location, which has helped obviously induce more weak contact because sinkers inside to righties, you get ground balls, you get jam shots, all that kind of stuff. We've seen Mikolas do this before. It's been a couple of years, but where he is just kind of not going to miss a ton of bats, but going to allow the good defense behind him to make plays, and he's going to not kind of get himself in really poor spots, and he's got a good run, but he gets the Reds at home, which is better than playing in Great American Ballpark. I'm just curious if you would pitch Mikolas against the Reds, or if you would do you believe in Mikolas at all and what he's doing right now?
The one thing I like about him, and I realize we're looking at a decent run for him, and so maybe it's the fillet of Mikolas, and this isn't who he is long term. But last 6 starts, 6, 6, 6, 7, 6 1/3, 6 innings, which is actually length. That's depth in today's baseball. He's been able to win 3 of those games. So if you're in a head-to-head league where you're just trying to chase innings, strikeouts, wins, I feel like he's gonna go deep in the game, which. And a little sad to say this, Eric, but now 6 innings is deep in a game. If somebody goes 7 innings, you've gone really deep. You've given yourself a chance to win. You've given yourself a chance to win. So he's somebody in head-to-head leagues where I'm not as concerned with the ratios. and I'm just really chasing, some of my leagues. Innings are a stat. Every league, strikeouts are a stat. Obviously, we're always trying to get wins. I feel like he's always going to give me that length and a fair chance at a win, where some of these other guys are more 4 and a third, 5 innings. Obviously, you need to go at least 5 to get a win, and then you need to play roulette with the bullpen. I think he's going to be a sneaky win streamer option because of that depth.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things you need to that you can the dances you have to play when you're especially in deep league lineups. Just a note before we end, I will say they just announced Eloy Jimenez will start against the Dodgers today. So I guess his general soreness and running like an 80-year-old man isn't going to keep him out of the lineup. So we'll see how long that lasts for. But
5 innings.
Eloy will start 5 innings. That's Scott's prediction. We can go over under 5 innings. Let us know. You can follow us on Twitter. Scott is at Scott_Pianowski. I am at Samski NYC. Again, please remember to download, rate, and review this podcast. It's very helpful for us. And we'll see you on Wednesday, for another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show.